What if one of the most important oil relationships in the world is quietly shifting, and almost no one in the United States is paying attention to it right now? For years, China and Saudi Arabia have formed one of the strongest energy partnerships on the planet, a system that powered industries, stabilized global trade, and helped keep oil markets balanced. But now, in 2026, something is slowly changing behind the scenes. Not suddenly, not loudly, but strategically, and with long-term consequences. And this shift is not just about oil anymore. It is about energy control, economic influence, and the future balance of global power. And if this continues, it could eventually influence global markets, fuel prices, and even economies like the United States. Before we go deeper, if you're interested in real global power shifts explained in a simple way, make sure to subscribe to Metal Media Insight, because what we are exploring here is subtle, but extremely important. A few years ago, the China-Saudi Arabia energy relationship looked extremely stable. China was importing massive amounts of oil every single day, and Saudi Arabia was one of its most reliable suppliers. The system was simple and predictable. Saudi Arabia supplied oil, China purchased it in large volumes, and global markets depended on that balance. For a long time, this created stability in global energy trade. Prices were more predictable, supply chains were smoother, and both sides benefited from long-term planning. But in global economics, stability never stays permanent forever, because when technology, politics, and long-term strategy start changing together, even the strongest systems begin to evolve. Fast forward to today, and China is no longer relying on a limited group of suppliers. Instead, it is gradually diversifying its oil imports. It is buying from multiple regions, negotiating harder deals, and reducing long-term dependency on any single source. Russia, Africa, and other Middle Eastern suppliers have now become part of a wider energy strategy. And this signals something important. The world's largest importer is actively reducing its risk exposure. But from the outside, nothing looks dramatic. There are no headlines saying the partnership is ending, no official announcement of a major shift. Instead, the change appears slowly through trade data, investment flows, and long-term energy policies. And when you connect all these signals together, a clear pattern begins to emerge. But here's something even more interesting. This shift is not happening in isolation. Other major economies are also watching closely. Countries in Europe, Asia, and even emerging markets are beginning to rethink their own energy strategies. Because when a country like China changes direction, it doesn't just affect one relationship, it sends signals across the entire global system. And those signals force others to adapt. One of the biggest drivers behind this shift is electric vehicles. China is now one of the largest EV markets in the world. Millions of electric cars are gradually replacing traditional fuel-based vehicles. This doesn't mean oil demand disappears, but it does mean that long-term demand growth is changing direction. And in global energy markets, even small changes over time create massive impact. Because China is not thinking in short cycles, it is thinking decades ahead. It understands that oil demand may not collapse overnight, but it will not grow the same way forever. And depending too heavily on one supplier in a changing market is a risk it wants to avoid. At the same time, China is investing heavily in renewable energy. Solar farms, wind power projects, and battery storage systems are expanding at a rapid scale. This is not just environmental policy, it is energy strategy. Because the more domestic and renewable energy capacity a country builds, the less vulnerable it becomes to external oil dependency, and that shifts global negotiation power. Now look at Saudi Arabia's position in this equation. For years, China represented stable and predictable demand. That stability helped Saudi Arabia plan long-term revenue, investment, and economic development. But when future demand becomes even slightly uncertain, it forces a strategic response. Diversification, new markets, and faster economic transformation beyond oil dependency. So what used to be a fixed relationship is now becoming a flexible strategic balance. Another major factor shaping this shift is global competition. China is no longer limited in where it sources oil from. It can import from Russia, Africa, and other regions depending on price, availability, and geopolitical conditions. And when a country becomes the world's largest buyer, choice becomes power. And power changes negotiation dynamics completely. This is where the United States becomes part of the picture, because global oil markets are deeply interconnected. When China changes its buying behavior, it affects global demand signals. And over time, these shifts influence pricing pressure, inflation trends, and energy costs in the United States. Not instantly, but gradually, as part of long-term global adjustments. But this story is not only economic, it is also political. Energy has always been linked with global influence and strategic power. By diversifying its energy sources, China increases its flexibility. It reduces dependency on any single supplier and strengthens its position in global negotiations. At the same time, Saudi Arabia is also adapting. It is investing in new industries, exploring global partnerships, and working toward a future where its economy is not fully dependent on oil. So what we are seeing is not a collapse of a partnership. It is a transformation of one. Both sides are adjusting to a world where oil still matters, but does not dominate everything. And this brings us to a bigger question. What does the future of global energy actually look like? Is it still controlled by oil, or is it becoming a mixed system of oil, renewables, and electrification? China appears to be preparing for that second scenario, a future where oil is still important, but no longer the central force of the global economy. And that is why its strategy is changing slowly, carefully, and deliberately. Because in global economics, the biggest changes rarely happen in one moment. They happen step by step, over time. And when you zoom out, this is not just about China and Saudi Arabia. It is about a global energy system slowly restructuring itself in real time. If you found this breakdown useful, share it with someone who follows global markets or world politics. Because understanding these shifts is becoming more important every year. And remember this, the world does not change in one moment. It changes through quiet decisions made over time. And right now, those decisions are slowly shaping the future of global energy. To understand this better, think about how demand works on a global scale. Oil markets are not just about how much is used today, but how much is expected to be used in the future. If future demand looks uncertain, even slightly, it changes how countries invest, how companies plan, and how prices are set long before the actual change happens. And that's exactly where this shift becomes powerful.